Greetings and welcome to Illinois in Focus Weekend Edition, powered by the Center Square. I'm Greg Bishop, Illinois editor at Franklin News Foundation, publisher of the Center Square Newswire service. This week for Illinois in Focus, the Center Square reporter Jim Talamonte and I will discuss the public shooting death of Turning Points USA founder and Illinois native Charlie Kirk, the ongoing debate about public safety in Chicago, and the upcoming elections. All that and more when we return for more Illinois in Focus, powered by the Center Square.
Some people would call him a loser. He ran for state office. He was beaten. He started a business. He failed. He ran for Congress. He lost. He was nominated for vice president. He lost again. But he knew only those who never tried are the real losers. And Abraham Lincoln was no loser. Persistence. Pass it on. From the Foundation for a Better Life at values.com.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop. Illinois native Charlie Kirk, who started Turning Points USA, was killed in front of more than 3,000 attendees of an outdoor event at a university in Utah Wednesday. Leaders from both sides have condemned political violence, but while the tragedy continues to unfold with a manhunt underway for the suspect and others who may be involved, political conversations continue to heat up. Joining me to discuss this is the Center Square reporter from Chicago, Jim Talamonte. Jim, reaction to the public murder of Kirk has come in all over the place, including President Donald Trump saying he's preparing to give Kirk a posthumous Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Yes, so the president, immediately upon learning of Charlie Kirk's passing, posted the news, referred to him as great and legendary. And, they have a history of Kirk, a history of being very supportive of President Donald Trump, and likewise, Trump returning that affection and praise. And it's a different age, and we've seen previous, and I think as we learn more, we're seeing more that the political angle to this, although when we certainly saw a lot of political political commentary before we even knew anything about what might have led to this. But certainly the event proved me wrong. Utah Valley University, awful thing. A young father and husband, and as there have been mostly conciliatory and remarks and people condemning violence, there have been a few exceptions, and not necessarily high-ranking officials, so to speak, but there are people who just, whether you want to call it lack of discipline or whatever, just couldn't help but turning it into some motive to make some kind of political statement about one side or the other. But when it's life or death, you would have to think that that would supersede these things. But a lot of very quick reactions as the word spread about this. It was just really an awful day on Wednesday.
And it's one of those things where days like what happened Wednesday, and we're recording this on Thursday afternoon, and again, a lot more to be developed in this story as that manhunt continues. They did find a weapon they believe was linked to the murder, including some shells that were found with the bolt-action rifle. So we're going to hear a lot more about this. But days like today, it's, I think, probably smart to steer away from social media just to, kind of reflect on the importance of life. But as you said, the reaction pouring in, Jim, as we reported at the Center Square yesterday, Governor J.B. Pritzker held an unrelated news conference just moments after the news broke and video spread of Kirk being shot publicly. And he said that he expressed sympathy to Charlie Kirk and his family, who's obviously become a target for somebody, he said. And he also talked about how he felt that political violence was ratcheting up in this country. Pritzker went on to talk about January 6th and President Donald Trump issuing pardons for the January 6th defendants, and saying that the president himself is somebody who's ratcheting this up. Reaction to those comments, with the news being as fresh as it was, Jim, you've got the Illinois Republican Party, even down to low-ranking Republicans that are blasting the governor for what they saw were insensitive and poor comments at this time.
Yeah, and heard more of that as well at a Chicago press conference involving some of the city Republicans, and Chicago flips red again. And you know, on the one hand, this had just happened when the governor was speaking, so he's off the cuff. He doesn't know what's going on, but at the same time, it's been a trend since January where almost any issue becomes partisan, and it's going to somehow be tied to him taking a shot at Donald Trump. And it's just even in a situation like this, you would think that the governor, being now a political veteran, he wasn't when he was first elected, of course, but now he's seeking a third term. He's been in office for quite some time. You would think that, you know, in that situation, you might just hold off and say little. But again, he kept going and bringing up January 6th, and it's just, it's just kind of I guess it's become such a habit, perhaps that I mean, every event he has, and he has a lot of them, when he gets into questions and answers, he's just verbally going after Donald Trump or anyone connected to him. So, But in this setting, you think, boy, well, this might be a case where he doesn't quite go that far. But a lot of people certainly on the right felt that again, he went over the top, and he's taken some criticism, again, mostly from conservatives. But you wonder, people who are, and we've talked about this before, there are a lot of people in the middle, people who maybe voted for J.B. Pritzker twice, but then turned and voted for Donald Trump. And so that kind of constant or continual anyway rhetoric, it can eventually bring some negative reactions or certainly wear on people.
In some of the things that, for instance, State Representative Adam Niemerg shared with me in reaction to not just the horrible tragedy from Thursday, saying he's devastated, or from Wednesday rather, saying he's devastated at Kirk's being shot, but he was appalled by Pritzker's comments, saying that it's not the time to inject politics. And then he reflected on Pritzker's previous comments earlier this year when he said that Republicans should know no rest. And then you work in all the other comments from Democratic leaders about Trump being a threat to democracy and Trump being an authoritarian, and imagery of the Gestapo and Nazism, and even Governor J.B. Pritzker talking about how he hears echoes of the Holocaust in what he sees under the Trump administration. These are things that can definitely lead to somebody who may not be of the right mind to take some violent actions against others. And I think that's a real concern. Even Niemerg saying that he fears for his safety and the safety of his colleagues.
Yeah, and Greg, remember, it was only it was a little over a year ago that State Rep Jeff Kiker, a Republican, had an event canceled, and because there was a death threat against him, and the individual involved was taken into custody. But and this was shortly after President Donald Trump had been targeted. Well, he was shot in the ear in one assassination attempt, and there was a second incident in Florida where an individual was going after him as well. So it's and this is aside from the other ongoing issues we have in terms of non-political violence, in terms of just whether they be school shootings, a couple now in the last few weeks, or just the street level violence that continues to affect many cities around the country. And when the governor, continues with that kind of rhetoric, you kind of think, just even if you look at it from political standpoints, well, this could be helping his opponents, because what did Tom Homan tell you, Greg, at the Freedom Caucus event in Texas last weekend? He said that Democrat leaders hate President Donald Trump more than they care for their communities. And State Rep Chris Miller of Illinois said, Pritzker has the worst case of Trump derangement syndrome he's ever seen. And so when you hear that kind of rhetoric, it just kind of, almost feel like, even if you're just aside from even the public safety issue, what this might spur someone to do, you think, well, just politically, the governor seems to be playing into his opponent's hands when he continues that kind of rhetoric, instead of maybe taking the high road, or at least once in a while toning it down just a little bit, especially on an occasion like we had this week with Charlie Kirk's murder. I mean, just, it would be nice in those situations of some calm and silence. But it just, apparently it's not the age we're in.
You can read more about this story. We'll continue to have developments, not just from Illinois, but our national team. Go to thecentersquare.com. Again, thecentersquare.com. I'm Greg Bishop, editor of Illinois at the Center Square. And joining me here for Illinois in Focus Weekend Edition is Jim Talamonte, the reporter for the Center Square out of Chicago. And Jim, obviously the situation of public safety in Chicago, very much top of mind. You mentioned Homan addressing members of the State Freedom Caucus Network in Dallas, Texas. We were able to be there and cover that speech. He talked about the increased enforcement efforts, saying that it's going to have to happen on the streets in sanctuary cities like Chicago because they refuse to cooperate with ICE enforcement. So that means more agents on the ground and things could get dicey, he says, but it has to happen because he's seen what porous borders lead to with human trafficking and abuse of children and the amounts of drugs that come into the communities. So Saturday, he's speaking in front of, it was Friday last week. He was speaking in front of this summit. And then we get back into Illinois, Jim, and Monday morning, we find out that the Department of Homeland Security has launched Operation Midway Blitz. All of this while weeks prior, Jim, you and I both reported on all the back and forth about whether or not the National Guard was going to be involved here. Where are we at with all of this right now, especially with what you just left earlier today on Thursday, a news conference with Chicago Flips Red?
Well, Chicago Flips Red and a number of other citizens and political candidates in Chicago are saying that they're pleading with the president, come to Chicago, please, we need your help. And Chicago Flips Red in the past has called for federal audits of Chicago finances. They have called for help from various federal departments, but they outright also called for military intervention. We need the National Guard. They said, Zoe Lee, the founder of Chicago Flips Red, said, President Trump, help us save Chicago before it's too late. And this happening on a day when just hours before this press conference, about a couple of miles away, if that, on Michigan Avenue, the Magnificent Mile, at a high-end store, Louis Vuitton, there was an apparent smash and grab, and the alleged offenders fleeing the flash and grab smashed into another vehicle. This is on Michigan Avenue. This is where you see postcards and high-end stores. And there was a fatality, not one of the alleged offenders but his car was struck by the alleged offenders fleeing the scene. And then there was a secondary crash this was a group of at least 5 to 7, maybe more, offenders. And then there was a secondary crash farther south, which had major thoroughfares blocked off for a period of time. And so this happening in again, a central part of the city. And so though the mayor and the Brandon Johnson and Governor Pritzker continue to talk about improved crime numbers, these things just keep happening. And the number of unsolved mass shootings over the last several months, those numbers keep going up. So it's a real problem. And then the Chicago Flips Red and then congressional candidate Lupe Castillo said, we need help. There is no public safety in Chicago is non-existent right now, is what Castillo said. And so they were critical of Pritzker and Johnson for their lack of action. And they were, pleading President Donald Trump to send in additional help.
There's a lot of back and forth on the issue of public safety. And, even the governor one morning shared a video on his morning walk of him walking down Lake Shore saying how beautiful it was and it wasn't an emergency. And but that's not necessarily the case when you get to the south and the west sides of Chicago. And even a resident of Chicago addressing a budget hearing this week talked about how all of these Labor Day parades and various other forms of protest against Trump were not walking down the streets of Inglewood. So clearly there seems to be a divide amongst the political leadership in Chicago and many of the residents on the streets who are really concerned about public safety. And in this ongoing debate, Jim, and again, stories people can read at thecentersquare.com, Governor Pritzker, as you said, he holds a lot of public events and a lot of availability. He's been asked time and again about the possibility of the use of National Guard in Chicago, but also just about the increased immigration enforcement. And Pritzker has time and again said that he will not call President Donald Trump for help. He does say that he wants more FBI, DEA, and ATF, but he doesn't think that there's an emergency and refuses to call President Donald Trump.
Yeah, and again, Lupe Castillo, she lives on the southwest side in La Villita. This is the biggest Mexican neighborhood in the city, and she said, he basically came out and challenged Governor Pritzker and Mayor Brandon Johnson, come and walk in my neighborhood at 10 o'clock at night without your bodyguards and see how it turns out for you. She said they won't do it. They're cowards. They won't come out without their bodyguards, which they always have with them. Well, of course, you'd understand that a mayor and a governor, people in public office, need protection, especially in the wake of the kind of political violence we've seen over the last few months and even couple of years. But so Pritzker said he wanted some help, and then apparently the president did send some. In addition to additional ICE, though, we got ATF, we had FDA, we had U.S. Marshals, and we had HHS, as well as the U.S. Attorney General herself, Pam Bondi, just outside of the city in Bensonville, right near O'Hare International Airport, where there was a major bust of illegal products from China. And so the feds are here, whether, even though we don't have the National Guard yet to help with public safety, we certainly have a stronger federal presence coming from Washington to fight various types of crimes.
Definitely something we're going to hear a lot more about all throughout, I'm sure, the rest of the summer into the fall. And it'll likely be a hot button issue for the 2026 election, which we'll touch on here in a moment, Jim. But I think in a couple of weeks, we're going to get more information about the Trump administration's efforts to curb cashless bail. Again, when the president a couple of weeks ago was talking about the possible use of the National Guard, he did sign an executive order about withholding funds from jurisdictions that have ended cash bail. Illinois is the only state and the first state to do that statewide. We have yet to really see any efforts as far as how much money Illinois could be without. But Jim, the president talked about this last week and earlier this week.
Yes, he did. And to be fair, in Illinois, Republican state legislators have repeatedly called on revisiting the Safety Act, revisiting cash bail. We need to do something because, in the announcement for Operation Midway Blitz, Department of Homeland Security posted names and photos of 11 non-citizen migrants with criminal charges or convictions, mostly convictions, and many of them violent convictions for violent crimes. And these are 11 individuals who all remain at large. And so we expect that as this operation continues, we'll see that perhaps some of these people could be captured, but they were in custody in county jails in other jurisdictions around Illinois, but they were let go. Now, why were they let go? Well, in large part because of the Safety Act. The local officials don't have a choice under the law. They have to let these people go. But we're talking people that, according to DHS, are gang members, drug traffickers, kidnappers, and rapists. I believe there was perhaps at least one or two individuals who had either murder or attempted murder charges or convictions. So potentially a lot of violent people out there, and that's what the president is hoping to, and his administration is hoping to clean up. But the Safety Act remains in effect. Perhaps when there are dollars at stake, given that our state and the city of Chicago have some major budget issues, perhaps there will be some movement. But boy, again, Governor Pritzker's really dug in against anything that the president wants to do.
And the governor running for a third term, 2026 elections coming up. We got to get through a primary first, but stories you'll continue to see popping up here at thecentersquare.com. We'll be tracking the 2026 election, Jim. There was a recent American Legislative Exchange Council meeting where Illinois State Representative John Cabello talked, and he addressed how Democrats are expected to outspend Republicans in the state of Illinois quite a bit.
Yeah, Cabello said, and it was really some great stuff from John Cabello in this conversation for the American Legislative Exchange Council. But Cabello with a lot to say, and he said we're going to be outspent 20-1. And while we see a lot of this Chicago flips red energy here in Chicago, and the kind of neighborhood conservative activism we just never saw before, at least haven't seen in decades in Chicago. On the statewide level, John Cabello a little more realistic and saying, well, we're just, we're getting outspent. Governor Pritzker has spent hundreds of millions of dollars on elections. And because now unions and other progressive groups don't have to spend on the governor's race with Pritzker there, this has allowed them to spend down ballots. So when you start getting into state legislative races, even into the county races, the governor has pointed out numerous times that even though the fall of 2024 didn't go well for Democrats across the country, in several Illinois counties, there were gains by Democrats. And so John Cabello said, well, one of the reasons we're having a real hard time picking up seats is that we're going to be outspent 20-1. And he says, I just hope we don't lose seats this time around, though Democrats already have a supermajority. So it's going to be really interesting to see. But as you said, it's going to be really interesting, just given everything that's happening at the national level, the real intensity of J.B. Pritzker against President Donald Trump, and then some of the communities that are perhaps going in different directions than they used to. Chicago one way, but then some of these suburban areas outside of Chicago, which used to be more conservative, have gone more in the direction of the Democratic Party. So even though we're more than a year, or we're not, I should say we're more than a year from the general, we're still months away, more than 6 from the primary. It's going to be quite a fascinating season. I think you're right. There's going to be a lot of really interesting races, and there could be some surprises in either direction.
And we've got, of course, the website Illinois Sunshine, run by Reform for Illinois. And if people want to go look at the political campaign war chests of the parties and individual candidates, they can pull that up. And Jim, I was able to just quickly look at 2 of the Republican gubernatorial candidates, and Ted Dabrowski actually had more than $1 million on hand. He just recently is looking to announce his candidacy for the Republican nomination. You've also got DuPage County Sheriff Jim Mendrick, but he only has about $100,000. So obviously in the primary, that's going to be important to see how much money these individuals raise, and that'll be part of this ongoing story, just as other statewide office holders. I was able to talk with a Republican candidate for Illinois Attorney General who told me that having the state's major seats like governor and secretary of state and attorney general being in the hands of one party is bad for transparency. It's bad for accountability. Joe Cervantes running. He's a former Marine. He stayed in Southern Illinois. He was the Jackson County state's attorney. Now he's running for Illinois attorney general. And part of the rationale is he does not think the attorney general should be the attorney for the governor or for the political party. It should be an attorney for the people. So people can read that story about the possible Republican attorney general candidate, but you talked to the Republican secretary of state candidate about their bid for office.
Yes, Diane Harris. She's from Joliet. She's running for Secretary of State. Now, we don't know yet if Alexi Giannoulias, or I think even for that matter, I don't know if Kwame Raoul has announced or not for Attorney General, but Giannoulias has not. There's some talk that Giannoulias may make a run for Chicago mayor, which that would, that election's early 2027. So he could, kind of like J.B. Pritzker, do both, but that might be a little bit of a challenge as well. So we'll see what Giannoulias does.
Again, stories we'll continue to track at thecentersquare.com. Thank you for joining us today, Jim. That's all the time we've got. And I want to remind listeners they can wake up with Illinois in Focus daily on YouTube or wherever you find podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus. Get these and other stories online anytime at thecentersquare.com.